from the San Francisco Bay Area. This is Athletics Talk Now with Dale Tafoya, one of the fastest growing podcasts about your Oakland A's. Join us as we celebrate the past and embrace the future of A's baseball. Let's jump right into the action with author, host, and journalist Dale Tafoya.
I'll always consider the A's of 2006 a very isolated and unique team in franchise history. Sort of like an island in A's history. First, they're the last A's team to reach the American League Championship Series. Before 2006, the A's hadn't reached the postseason since 2003, the season the A's fell to Boston in 5 games in the ALDS. After 2006, the team had a playoff drought of 5 years that was snapped when the A's dramatically surged into the ALDS in 2012. That was recent, so I'm sure most of you remember. You're excited about it. Typically, though, A's playoff runs are bunched in 2 or 3 years. And that's why this team is so distinct to me and sticks out the most. It was a one-year thing. But boy, was it 1 year. By the way, this is Athletics Talk Now, a podcast that celebrates the past and embraces the future of A's baseball. My name is Dale Tafoya, and this is podcast number 125. It is Thursday, January 30th, 2014. And as much as I want to entertain you, I also want to educate you, A's fan. So one day down the road, you'll say, oh, the 2006 A's. Let me listen to that podcast again. But let's talk about some key background facts about the 2006 A's. First, they captured the AL West by virtue of a record of 93-69. They swept the Twins in 3 games in the ALDS once they reached the playoffs, and they were swept by the Tigers in 4 games in the ALCS. Yes, A's fans, the Tigers again. Ken Maka was the manager at the time. The A's drew 1,976,625 fans that year at the McAfee Coliseum. Lou Wolf and John Fisher had just purchased the team. 2006 was also the season the A's decided to cover the entire third deck with tarps. The top player in WAR for the A's was Barry Zito, 4.4. The player with the highest salary on the A's was catcher Jason Kendall at $11.5 million. Also, on another note, the late Joe Kennedy, a left-handed reliever, was in the bullpen for the A's that year. Some key new additions to the club before the season: Frank Thomas, Milton Bradley, Esteban Loaiza. And the man who assembled this club, of course, was A's GM Billy Beane, and he's joining me. Billy, first of all, this past November, you celebrated 25 years with the organization. You signed with the club as a player in 1988. And just like there's something to be said about a player sticking with one team over the course of his career, that can be also emphasized with a baseball executive. Congrats, Billy.
Thanks, Dale. And yeah, I didn't really realize it had been that long an anniversary when you had sort of alerted me to that. I'm certainly proud of my association here, and I guess I feel sort of fortunate too. In this kind of business, it's not often that you get to stay in one place that long, particularly a place as great as this. And all I remember is when I first started on the front office, and I'd had the opportunity to interview when I was the assistant GM and other positions for the GM job, and Sandy gave me some good advice. He says, it's the thing about becoming a general manager, it's not about becoming one, but about becoming one and doing it as long as you want to do it. And at that time, I turned down the interviews, and I thought it was good advice. And so far, I've been lucky to be able to say that.
Billy, 2006, and that's what we're talking about today. The 2006 A's. It marked the 8th consecutive winning season for the A's during that millennium run that started in 1999. You had a starting rotation on that team that consisted of Dan Herron, Barry Zito, Joe Blatton, Esteban Loaiza, and even Kirk Sarlo started some games for you. That era hatched 5 postseason berths How unique was that 2006 club? How different was it from some of the other A's teams that you assembled?
It's funny that team sort of seems to get lost in the shuffle a bit, but I think we were really, really proud as an organization of what that club accomplished. We'd been we'd just missed the playoffs in '04, I think, by one game, and I think we may have even finished in second place '05. I'm not sure. And at that point, it looked like we were sort of going to fade off into a rebuilding phase. I think that was the anticipation, or at least the expectation that people would have. And really for that team to sort of, we had a couple of obviously huge acquisitions. Frank Thomas, who was amazing that year for us, and then Milton Bradley, and we only sort of had that group, for 1 year. But once again, it kind of gets lost in the shuffle. And I think, looking back on the years, I think if someone would ask, 2012 year was probably the most enjoyable. We really enjoyed '06 from a front office and an organization standpoint, because I don't think anyone expected us to win the division, and it was really neat to have now a Hall of Famer like Frank Thomas have the year he had. He was a great influence on the young guys and just such an intense competitor and professional. But it was, then again, it was I think we remember that was when we went into Detroit, and had that tough series there, and it was just freezing cold. And so it was looking back, it's one that people don't talk about, but it was very, very satisfying for, I think, everybody.
And interestingly, Billy, the A's opened that season at home and lost to the Yankees 15-2. And in that game, game one, Bobby Crosby lacerated his index finger. So here comes Marco Scutaro, who, like many players, resurrected his career in Oakland. At one point, Milton Bradley was out with a knee injury. Ellis was out. Talk about that depth you had that year, Billy, with the likes of Bobby Kitely, Marco Scutaro, and Jay Payton. And Payton led the club in hitting.
Jay was one of those guys. You look back in those little small acquisitions you make over the course of the seasons, but he was a player we always liked, and he brought a real sort of raw intensity to the game as well. And as you mentioned, if we don't have Jay Payton that year, we probably don't win it. But I remember that opening day. I think Barry pitched that, right? Barry Zito.
Yes.
And we just got, opening night, you're excited. You got the Yankees sellout crowd, and it was over very quickly. But we bounced back. And, the other thing about that, and sort of going back to the postseason, is when we went into the Minnesota series, we weren't favored to win that. They had Johan Santana at the top of his game. And
sure.
And I remember, actually, the playoffs are games I usually don't mind sitting through and watching, even though they're kind of nerve-wracking, and sitting up in the suite up there in Minnesota with the families. And I think Frank homered that first game. We got off to a good lead. It was also the game that, Kotsay, or not that game, but the series. The next game was when Kotsay had that inside the Parker homer when Torrey dove for the ball in center field. But once again, that was really not a team that people, I don't think, really gave a lot of hope for going into the season. And it was funny, it all changed. I remember the day we signed Frank, or the day we first had contact with Frank about coming to Oakland, and we were in the winter meetings. And Frank was motivated, and we met him in my suite. And I think we were in Dallas that year. And you walked through the door, and I'd seen Frank through his whole career, and you realize, what a great player and a physical presence he is. But until you see the man in person, and he was in incredible shape too, and he had a look in his eye that, hey, I'm going to come back, I'm going to have a great year. And that's really what started it for us. It was really just signing Frank, and then bringing in compliments. I shouldn't say compliments, because Milton was a very, very important part of that team as well, and guys like Jay Payton.
And Billy, if you do some research on the 2006 A's, the team's hitting splits, they were in the middle or toward the bottom league-wide, but defense was another story. The 2006 A's had the third highest fielding percentage in all of baseball and the third fewest errors as well. This team caught the ball, Billy.
Yeah, it's one thing we have to, we've focused on, and it really starts around then, and actually a little bit before that, we weren't, able to, early in the decade, we were able to sort of scoop up those high on base guys, and under everyone's noses, that quickly evaporated. So we had to look for other skills and strengths and players that we could afford that we thought weren't really being recognized. And And that was really about the time that defense really became a very, very important part of our team construction, as it is now, and it's continued to be. But yeah, and especially in Oakland too. It's a great pitcher's park, but anytime you're playing the game, if you can minimize outs, and if I think Dan Herron was a big strikeout guy, and Barry, over the course of his career could be, but if you don't have strikeout guys, you want to make sure you catch the ball.
Sure, and let's talk about one of your best signings in recent history, and you alluded to it earlier, Billy. Frank Thomas, you signed him in January for $500,000 plus incentives. The guy who many thought was declining ends up placing fourth in MVP voting and had just a great presence in the clubhouse, great influence on Milton Bradley. Talk about that signing and what did the now Hall of Famer mean to the club at the time?
I'll tell you, you know what, Frank is, he spent, 1 year, and he came back briefly after his stint in Toronto, but we still talk about Frank. He was sort of what everybody wants, but certainly represented the type of offensive player we've always liked here, the high on base, the power guy. And what was so interesting about that year, if you recall, is that Frank got off to a miserable start. And, there were some drum beats that, maybe he shouldn't be playing and or shouldn't even be here. And I like I said, I think that we all of us showed a lot of sort of faith that, hey, this guy's going to turn around. And when he did, it's almost like it clicked one day. And I want to say somewhere in the middle of May is when it really took over. And at that point, he just absolutely carried us. And it was exactly what you want a playoff team to have, is that big, power presence in the middle of the lineup that's always around the corner. And he was a great guy. We have a fantasy football league team, our league here in the office, and the name of our fantasy football league, the whole league is actually called the Big Hurt Fan Club. And that's the kind of, he only had the impact on the field, but the impact on all of us. We love the guy, and couldn't have been more proud that he spent a year in an Oakland uniform as he goes into the Hall of Fame.
Progressing into the season, in June, Billy, the A's pulled off a 10-game winning streak, and the A's were tied for first with the Rangers with a record of 45-43 at the All-Star break. Barry Zito was the lone selection to make the All-Star team. And if one single moment sticks out to me that season, it was Sunday, July 30th, when Milton Bradley hit a 3-run walk-off homer off Blue Jay closer B.J. Ryan. The Coliseum went nuts. Describe that moment, Billy, and the impact Milton Bradley had on this team, and how careful were you about signing this guy who had a reputation of being controversial?
Well, you want to hear the funny part of that story, and I remember exactly where I was. My daughter was out visiting, and she was still in high school at that point. She was up for the weekend, and she was going to be flying home that afternoon, and it looked like we were going to lose that game. So I said, hey, let's leave the game. Let's go. We actually went over, and just a little pump for some of the local. We went over to Cesar's in Berkeley for a little late afternoon, early dinner before she took her flight. Because I had at that point said, we got B.J. Ryan's going to come into this game. We're not going to come back. We're going to lose this game. And I was sitting in the restaurant there in Berkeley, and I had this little, at this time it wasn't like we have access now to scores, but I had this, device where I could find out what happened in the game. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden the score popped up, and I can't remember what the final was, 9-8 or 6-5, whatever. I can't remember the final. But we went from 2 outs in the 9th inning to winning the game by 1, just like that. And I looked and I said, and I jumped out of my seat like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And I called in, what happened? And they gave me the rundown that Milton had hit a home run to win it. And I remember that. I do remember that. That was a huge moment. Mm-hmm. And I remember specifically, about that game. So, there was when you have a team that wins the division, you're going to have those. And another, you mentioned defense, and another sort of moment I remember of that season was I think we were playing the Rangers, and the one thing about our defense, the guy who was, and he was at that point playing with a lot of injuries that would end up probably hurting him a little bit later, but he played through a lot of them hurt, was Eric Chavez. His defense at third base, he was such a weapon that year. And I remember I think it was a first and third play where there was a chopper down the line, and he went down the line, and I believe Hank Blaylock was on third, and he was able to tag Hank as he got the ball for an out and then go over to first for the double play. And And it just, really was a representation of what Eric did for us all year long at third base. He was absolutely, just as good a defensive year as I've ever seen a player. What people don't know is that he was playing his glove. He was really banged up that year, and as I said, it hurt him, I think, in following years because he wanted to be out there. But we don't win the division either without his glove at third. Moments like that, I do still remember.
And he wins a gold glove that year, and he battled forearm tendonitis, I think, the whole year.
He was all kinds of stuff. Yeah. All kinds of stuff. It was. He really went back. He came into the office, and I remember, he was so banged up that, Eric was always very, cognizant of making sure that he was pulling his weight. And he came in and he said, "Hey, listen, I just don't think offensively that I'm really, the player I should be right now. I don't want to hurt the team." And we emphasized, how important his glove was. And he said, "Listen, if you need to move me to 8th or 9th in the lineup, I'll do it. Don't think you're going to hurt my pride." That was just the type of player he was. And once again, he people don't know how banged up he was that year, but it was critical that he be out there because his defensive play was another reason, again, why we won.
And the A's catch fire in August, Billy, and go 21-6. The pitching staff had the lowest ERA in all of baseball at 3.25. And Esteban Loaiza earned AL Pitcher of the Month for August, going 0-4 with a 1.48 ERA. And, of course, the catcher was Jason Kendall, who didn't put up the power numbers some expected with the A's, but he provided that veteran presence for the pitching staff, Billy.
Yeah, and he was, like Jay Payton, was a really gritty competitor. And that was the year him and, that was also the year, too, wasn't it, that he stole home after the throwback to the pitcher, I believe.
Yes, I believe so. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there were some pretty memorable moments in that year that will always make highlight films. And I think it might have been the year him and Lackey kind of got into it down there in Anaheim. Jason was, that's kind of what that team was. There was some junkyard dogs, so to speak, some real feisty competitors, Jason being one of them. And he was sort of him and Kotze, a Big Frank. They were kind of the leaders in the clubhouse. And the other thing, too, I remember, too, you think about moments is, we're in Minnesota, and I believe we just gone up 2-0 that series, and we're on the bus. And if you recall, I think Ellis had gotten hit by a pitch, and I told the bus to wait till he got back from X-rays because I sort of had this need to know what Mark's, what his hand looked like. And I remember they pulled we were sitting on the bus. Mark returned from the doctor, radiologist, and they showed me the X-ray, and it was, he was clearly unable to perform the rest of the year, and it was really a downer because Mark was also a real important part of that team, and we had to sort of reach down to find a replacement for him for the remainder of the postseason.
And on September 26th, Billy, the team clinches the AL West in Seattle, and the A's have to go to Minnesota and play the Twins with a weight on the organization of not being able to get past the first round of the playoffs for 4 consecutive years. You sent Zito, Loaiza, and Heron to start each game. You ended up sweeping the Twins in 3 games. What were your thoughts going into the ALDS, and how much relief did you feel after finally getting past the first round and being a series away from the World Series?
Yeah, well, that's the funny thing about the postseason. There's years we've been beaten in the first round where I thought we were the better team, and in that case, it was strange. I actually thought Minnesota going in was probably the better team, particularly when you take a short series and a guy like Santana can lead it off, and you're playing in Minnesota open up. So, that's a short series, or there's a certain amount of randomness that exists, and in that case, I think I think we were once we got up 2-0. I didn't think these guys were going to ever let it get out of the reach. But and beating Santana was a big psychological advantage for us too. But it just, once again, that's the funny thing about the playoffs. Sometimes the better team doesn't always win. But that for those 3 games, we were the better team.
And of course, and unfortunately, the A's run into the Tigers and hot-hitting Placido Polanco and Kenny Rogers in the AL Championship Series, and the team gets swept in 4 games. Frank Thomas was 0 for 13 in the series, but Milton Bradley was just a hitting machine that series and was 9 for 18. What do you remember most about that that series, Billy, if you want to remember anything about that.
Yeah, that was a tough one. I said it was a little bit of a blow not having Ellie for the series because he quiet guy, but also one of the quiet leaders in the clubhouse and one of our rocks. So I think going in there was a little bit of a hey, this is going to be a tough battle, and also Detroit came out. Barry I think opened up here at home. We had the first 2 games here, and Detroit came out just pounding the ball. And at no point did you always sort of like a boxer, you felt like round 1 you were against the ropes. And even in the last game where we got to a quick lead and then the game got tight and I think it was finished with an Ordonez homer. It was at that point we were just on fumes and the the referee had to call it. But they beat us fair and square. They beat us pretty handily. And as to why, I would say at that point they were the better team than we were, and they showed it there.
Thanks for talking the 2006 A's with me, Billy. And looking at the 2014 season, spring training is a few weeks away. How satisfied are you with your moves this offseason?
Yeah, well, you always got to be careful, and because I think we addressed a lot of the areas we set out to address when we started the off season. I think in some areas we're deeper. I think bullpen is one, and so no, I think we're pleased. I just spoke to Bobby Melvin. I spoke to Bobby Melvin this morning. He's heading down right after Fan Fest and going to be there a week early. So I think we're excited. I think hopefully we can build off last year and we're gonna have our challenges. I mean, Seattle's improved. Texas is always Texas, and with the signings they trade a fielder and Chu, they're gonna be good as they always are, and hopefully we stay healthy. I think if we stay healthy, we'll be in good shape. But as always, this time of year you start getting antsy. You get down to Arizona, although we've had such great weather in the Bay Area.
Sure.
That usually you want to get out of the rain and get down there, but it's tough leaving the Bay Area with the weather we've had this whole winter. So we're excited.
That's Billy Beane. I'm Dale Tafoya. Billy, thanks for always giving me time, and it's greatly appreciated.
Well, thanks for the support, Dale.
And thank you, A's fans, for joining me today. And I want to provide you with some notable A's news that happened after the 2006 season. First, after concerns of a disconnect with some players, A's manager Ken Maka was dismissed of his duties 2 days after the season ended. Bob Guerin was named his replacement on November 17th. The Big Hurt, Frank Thomas, signed a 2-year deal worth $18 million with the Toronto Blue Jays. Barry Zito signed a 7-year deal worth $128 million with the San Francisco Giants. And longtime third base coach Ron Washington went on to become the manager of the Texas Rangers. And A's fans, if you want to hear more podcasts on your A's and their history, visit our site, athleticstalknow.com, on iTunes. Just search Athletics Talk Now and make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Athletics AD. We'll talk soon, A's fans.